your cell phones. Each director received notice of the committee meeting. Public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law. Director Tracy LaChance and Director Wayne Wilson indicated that they would not be present for this meeting. All the other directors have indicated that they would be here. Do we need to call the roll? No, I don't think we do. At this point in the meeting, we've set aside time to hear from the general public, but we have no cards. No one wishes to speak. We'll move forward on the agenda. Beginning with item agenda 1.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, all right. So with this agenda item, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the property evaluation process up at Possum Kingdom, give a little bit of history, status, have a couple of ideas for some efficiencies that'll move that process along a little bit, and then talk about some additional information that we think may be important as we move forward with that process. So a little bit of history. Back in 2021, we retained services of an outside firm to conduct a property evaluation process that had basically 3 phases. You can see those phases listed here: development of a database, and then the rest of the phases 2 and 3 were more master planning and making recommendations. After we completed phase 1, mainly due to cost considerations, the decision was made not to move forward with the additional phases. So shortly after that, we kind of had a lull in the process. Okay, what are we going to do? And so in 2024, BRA staff developed an internal process to evaluate the properties. And we developed a matrix, and you all have seen the matrix before. We've judged properties against it. These are the things that it looks at: floodplain, water quality, habitat, species, recreation, what its current use is, and the impacts on staff from development. We then began the process at PK of evaluating our tracts, and the plan was to start at the far north end of the lake and work our way southward down to the dam. When we developed that process, we indicated that the timeline for it would be lengthy, that it wouldn't be something that would happen quickly. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll talk about them. This is one of the reasons. So we got a lot of tracts. So we have 386 total, and you can see the breakdown of those in terms of size. Now, to date, 9 tracts have been presented to and acted on by the committee and the board. So obviously that's not a ton of progress on that big 386 number. However, one of the things I will notice since 2024, one of the particular tracts that took up quite a bit of our time was the airport. Airport is unique, obviously, when compared to our other tracts. It's an airport. And so the committee and the board have adopted a path forward on that one, and that is moving along. Another reason for timeline challenges is we don't have staff solely dedicated to the property evaluation process. So the staff that does that are the same staff that are working on BRA core mission focused initiatives: Allens Creek, EWC, Bell House, Lake Whitney reallocation, and then obviously current BRA operations. So the property evaluation work is conducted as time allows with those staff working on those other things. So I've got a couple of ideas for efficiencies here, ways to move this process forward. And we did post this for action, so it's for the committee to consider to then recommend to the board in November. One of those, and I'll show maps of both of these here in just a second, but one of those is to act on all the floodplain properties, those that are 50% or more in FEMA high-risk flood zone A, all at once via a blanket motion to retain. If the committee were to do that, that takes care of or makes a decision on approximately 159 tracts. The second one, which to us is even a little bit more low-hanging fruit, our current operations properties are included in the 386. And those are parks, trail system, lake office, dam, hike and bike trails, all the things that we're already currently using at PK. And that includes 27 tracts. So if you add these up, an action on both of these would take care of 186 of the 380 some odd tracts in terms of making a motion to retain those. As far as the operations properties, we obviously have no intention of ever recommending to you that we divest of those because we're using them right now. And so when we talk about the floodplain properties, these are the ones that we're talking about, the ones in red. You can see they're mainly situated on this far northern end of the lake where it really looks more like the river, so not necessarily on the main body of the lake down here. We've got a couple of island properties that are usually underwater. You've got some riverine tracts in the tributaries that flow into the lake. All of those are 50% or more in FEMA high-risk flood zone A, or the 100-year floodplain. So those are the properties. Those are the approximately 159 tracts that we're talking about there. The operations properties. So you've got the airport, which again, the committee and the board have already acted on. We are retaining that. You've got our hike and bike trail system, which was put in place between '06 and '08 that goes out onto the peninsula. You've got park facilities, public boat ramps, convenience stations. And then down here, as many of you have been to, you've got the dam, the lake office, RSMU maintenance facility. So those are the 27 tracts that make up our operations properties. So with that, I have a resolution, but obviously open to discussion, questions. But again, this is a way to try to make progress with this overall property evaluation, looking at these properties that have similar common characteristics, treating them the same, and making a motion that in this case, we retain those properties. The floodplain properties are extremely beneficial to BRA from the standpoint of our operations, particularly in flood ops. They're important from a water quality buffer perspective. What flows in and through those tracks makes its way into the lake. A lot of them also have habitat. And then obviously the operations properties are ones that we're already using. So with that, happy to answer any questions. I have a resolution after this, and then I have another item that I want to discuss with the committee.
Director Lloyd.
Do we know, like, not average size, but maybe you know average size of these?
Here's where I'm headed, is if over half of it is in the floodplain, that sounds fine at first, but if it's 100 acres and 50 of it is outside the floodplain, that might be a little different. But if it's all 2-3 acre stuff.
How many of those are large? What do we say?
I'm thinking of those river ones, 4, maybe 5. Most of them were smaller
Small.
pieces. There are maybe a few where there's still a substantial piece that's outside of that floodplain, but it wasn't a huge number.
So it's a smaller number of the total. Yeah.
Wes, I didn't hear your question. What were you asking?
Since we're looking at, the recommendation is tracts that are over 50% is in the floodplain. I'm wondering if a tract is a large tract, if there's still potential to have some kind of benefit to getting rid of it and keeping what's in the floodplain or something like that. So if a tract is 100 acres, 200 acres, that's different than a 2 acre, 3 acre, half acre, right? See where I'm headed? So I didn't know if we had evaluated a threshold gross number of acres number or not, but. So Tiffany, what is a significant size? Is that the word you used?
No. Sizes are variable. There are, I think, a handful in there that are over 100 acres, so I would consider that significant. We have on most of these properties completed the full complete evaluation, not just the flood zone, and a lot of those upriver still rank out with an environmental value that indicate it might be strategic for BRA to retain those because we don't know what's coming to us in the future as far as future environmental regulations. I think as we move into the properties adjacent to the reservoir and down on the peninsula, we'll see some differing results. But a lot of those floodplain properties, because they are floodplain properties and or are landlocked, have also been left pretty much untouched and are pristine wildland right now. So most of those, even if we do the full complete environmental evaluation on them, still kind of ranked out in that higher end of it might be wise for us to consider to retain. But I would have to go back and pull exact numbers and look at those that are, how many of them are not in the 100% in the floodplain as far as, yeah, so I think that was up in that river piece, only a handful were over 100 acres where you might be able to sever half and half.
And I think the other important point that Tiff makes is the fact that they're all landlocked. It's private property on all sides of them. So access is an issue.
I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question. I'm sorry. What are we
Go
trying,
ahead.
what are we trying to accomplish, really? What's our goal here?
So when we started the property evaluation process, it was to look at the total amount of property that we have at Possum Kingdom and essentially figure out what we're going to do with it. That
Basically what
really
to do with
was
it.
Are we going to
Okay,
keep it?
I-
Are we going to keep it? Or are we going to sell it?
I would say, of course, you hired a property evaluation. I'm sure knowing you guys, they're probably one of the best there is you can hire. But I can tell you, you probably go get some major developers. They'll look at that, all the issues with FEMA, and they'll see everything they can do to take it and make it a big time, and they'll do it. You know, and they're used to all kinds of issues going through cities and Colorado doing stuff that's unbelievable. You can figure out how they do it. And so I guess the question I'm coming at is, why do we want to do this though? What's the purpose behind it? Are we just trying to get money or just get the monkey off our back, so to say, and not have to mess with this? Or
No, in this case, we would be making a recommendation to you that we retain these properties, that we not sell them because of the benefit that they have to our operations and the water quality benefit they provide in terms of water that flows over and through them that makes its way into the lake. I think a ton of development in these tracts would concern us from that standpoint. I think that you could see developments come in, put in a lot of septics. That's going to stress us from a staffing standpoint. We have to permit and inspect all the septics in that area around the lake within a certain distance of the lake. So I think you would see that be an issue for us as well. So I think as a staff, we see a lot of benefit to retaining those properties. just 'cause of-
what's the width of this part of the river and the depth of it?
I think it varies. It's going to be variable.
Are we talking about, say, the size of it from here to like this room or smaller?
I think to characterize the Brazos in that area, you can't the depth changes all over the place, but I would think that, I've been on it quite a bit, and the width is probably similar to what you see in Waco, without as much water in it.
I guess I still don't grasp. I mean, it's slow. I'm not grasping what we're
No,
trying
the
to
goal
accomplish.
here, Director Bourne, I think was, over time, we have a lot of people approach the BRA about our properties.
I'm sure you do, yeah.
And we felt that it was a good process to go through to evaluate the properties to protect our future position in holdings and have the board sign off that those properties were significant to the continued operation of the BRA.
Okay,
So-
David, I want to interject and I want to add, because Director Bourne, you bring up a very important question that surfaces every time this committee has met over the last however many years since we started. So number one, what is our mission of a board as a board member? And it is to make sure that we are protecting our water, that we're creating new water, that we're educating people on water. That is our ultimate responsibility as a board member. Yes, over time, people have come to us about purchasing property, and every time, David gets those letters, it was, evaluating kind of onesies and twosies, and this committee was not put together to decide what properties we're going to divest of and whatever. It was to learn who our stakeholders were in all those communities, who the county commissioners were, who were the judges, to learn who the players in those communities were, and then to decide how we were going to tackle the properties that the BRA had to make sure that we're in line with our mission and weren't just, telling people, no, that's not for sale, or no. We wanted concrete, valuable information in order to make a decision. And so the committee came up with what Matt showed earlier was, why we're going to do this. Why are we looking at this? And then Tiffany and her team came up with a matrix on how to go and analyze every single one of those properties starting way up on the top there in north. And then she and her team actually went out and did water sampling, et cetera, and then would bring it back to us. And then we would say, yes, that's a value based on their professional opinion, their recommendation to us. So now what Matt has done, because it is a very cumbersome process, there's a lot going on. Not only is Tiffany doing the things identified there, but she's also building a building. It is an attempt to say, let's try to bite off more and say, okay, these things are in the floodplain. Can we just decide at this moment that we're just going to keep those and move on and kind of funnel it down to get a narrow focus and more direction for Tiffany and her team to get going. But the main thing is that as a board, we have to make sure the BRA is in line, stays in line with the mission. And over time, we've had so many inquiries about buying this property or getting rid of this property and et cetera, et cetera. And we felt like we needed a better handle on those properties, what they were and what value they were to the mission. And if it was such that we needed to retain it, then we would have the documentation and have the survey, the history of why we chose in today's time to keep.
I guess the
move
next
on.
question would be, I don't know if it's even relevant, is how much water, acreage of water runs to the creek to feed Possum Kingdom that we're willing to give up to somebody else, and I don't know, I guess I can't get defining in my mind a real reason why we want to do this, other than maybe inconvenience. It drains staff, I understand that. But, I'm just saying it's a volume of water and losing control of that water and the history of it. I just think you have to be real careful.
We would maintain
Let me,
control of it.
David,
Oh, go ahead.
okay. First of all, to answer your question, Director Boren, I have been, depending on the flood stage of the river, I have been all the way up to the Bunger Bridge, which is just south of Graham. When the Brazos is in the flood stage, you can actually go by outboard all the way up there. Most of the time you could pretty near stand, except for all the silt that's on the bottom of the river. But it's probably going to be about knee deep in the normal flow. Of course, when the river's flooded, it's going to be much deeper than that. But what we're talking about really as Presiding Officer Flores has indicated is relieving ourselves of these floodplain properties that are on the river and are really landlocked way up on the upper stretches of the river. And it gets resolution to a bunch of properties that are prone to flood and are the majority in the flood zone up along the river, and are really of no greater use than what they serve right now, which is to be inundated by floods. It resolves only a small percentage of the overall acreage. We have yet to deal with significant amount of property that's down on the lake proper. By resolving this area that's up on the river, we'll get, I don't know, Matt, what is it, about half of the actual physical properties we've got to deal with?
That's close. And I think it's important I want to point out, we would be recommending to you all a motion to retain these, not to get rid of them.
Yeah, we won't divest
recommending-
these properties.
yeah,
We'll
that
we'll hold them.
But we'll still have plenty to say grace over in terms of properties to assess. We would still have to get down into the main body of the lake. We'd still have a couple hundred properties to go through.
Now, the other thing that is extremely important, and I believe this to be the case, is that we don't want to let any of the property that we divest go into the hands of somebody that's going to create a long-term problem for the BRA. And that would be the case, I think, for any of the properties that border on the lake or on the river. And by retaining the ownership of these properties that are flood prone, we'll ensure that in the future that we're not going to see somebody come into the ownership that would be a problem for the BRA. Now, David, I think you had.
Director Lattimore, your chairman, that's exactly what I was gonna drive home, is by retaining these properties and our flowage easements, we don't have to worry about the risk and the liability of flooding properties in our normal operations of the reservoir. So we're recommending that the BRA retain these properties, because we feel strong enough through the evaluations that we've done and the fact that they're either have flowage easements or they're in the floodplain, that they serve an important role for the BRA in the future.
Let me ask you, why do we have liability of flooding when people by their own choice and money went and bought land right up on the river that's a flood zone?
So right now we have the flowage easements for these properties, and that's the reason we want to retain them.
Okay.
So if we sold and for some reason there was a transfer of the property, then Director Bourne, it may turn out one day to be who has the best attorney. Settles that lawsuit over, the BRA's operation of a water supply.
Yes, sir.
A question, the second, back on the matrix for properties, floodplain is the first one listed. The second one is water quality impacts. Yeah, so just as a reference. Now, if you go back to the map, is there any consideration as a reason to retain the water quality impact because of non-point source pollution or, the proximity of the properties to the river here, that could be a basis for the recommendation as well?
Yes, it's one of the main considerations. It's one of the considerations that go into it. It's impacts to water quality. And, Tiffany, correct me if I'm wrong, potential use of that property for mitigation at some point.
Okay. I mean, I know it'd be difficult to quantify that, but it seems, if we're gonna document why, we should make sure that that's included in the why.
Yes.
More so. Amongst others.
Any other questions? Thoughts? Would you read the resolution?
I can read the resolution, and then again, I'm going to have another item to discuss after this. Be it resolved that the Property Management Committee recommends to the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority adoption of the following proposed resolution. Whereas staff has developed a systematic methodology and process for internally evaluating real property owned by the Brazos River Authority to determine the best use of such real property. Whereas staff has determined that maintaining ownership of all tracts at Possum Kingdom Lake, 50% or more of which are located within FEMA high-risk flood zone A, will serve to further the efforts of the Brazos River Authority to preserve and protect the natural resources of the Brazos River Basin as they provide a benefit to the operations of the reservoir, a natural barrier for water quality protection, stream bank stabilization and erosion control, and wildlife habitat. Further, these properties may also be utilized for potential future conservation opportunities to support the Brazos River Authority's mission and strategic goals. Whereas staff has also determined that it is in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority to retain all property currently utilized for day-to-day Brazos River Authority operations at the lake. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby resolves to retain ownership of all tracts at Possum Kingdom Lake, 50% or more of which are located within FEMA high-risk flood zone A, with the exception of property approved for conveyance by the board on May 19, 2025, and be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby resolves to retain ownership of all tracts currently utilized for ongoing Brazos River Authority operations at Possum Kingdom Lake as of the date of this resolution. Should I?
Director Bourne has a question.
Yes, sir.
I really can't ever imagine myself ever voting against anything you guys do because it's always common sense line up, and I agree. Either I'm just having a hard time understanding. So if you divest yourself of this property, who has control of it?
We're recommending that we retain
Okay.
it.
Retaining.
We want to keep it.
Okay, that's what I need. Okay, I got it.
This
Then
is,
I'm
this
on
is a
board.
motion to retain. Yes.
It's simple question, simple answer. I got you. Okay.
And let me do this real quick before you all act. I've read the resolution, but let me explain the exception. If you all remember back in May, the committee and the board took an action to give some property to the city of Graham. And the city of Graham is currently finishing up surveys on that. And that goes back to the old history of the Graham flood control process. So you all have already acted on that and voted to do that. I did not want that to get caught up in this resolution. So that's why there's the exception for the property approved for conveyance in May.
Good.
So it doesn't catch that one.
You've heard the reading of the resolution, and I have a motion for approval by Director Flores, second by Director Huber. Would you poll the committee?
Vice Chairman Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Bourne,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
I still need my slideshow. Thank you. So moving forward, obviously we're getting closer down to the main body of the lake. And so when we get down there, we're looking, most of the tracks addressed to date, except the operations properties, are not necessarily on the main body of the lake. They're in that riverine portion way north. As we get further into the lake, those properties present the opportunity for additional on-water development. Now, and this has been said before by Chairwoman Flores, the intent of this process, this evaluation process, is not to sell. That is not the goal of it. But the potential does exist the more properties that we assess. Depends on the characteristics of each individual property. We believe that as good as our current matrix is, as we get to these lakefront tracks, there is a data point that it does not include. We know that it doesn't include it. And that is the impact of additional residential, commercial docks, marinas, boat storage on the lake. How much more boating capacity or boat loading can Possum Kingdom take? And so the idea that we wanted to talk to the committee about, get your feedback, your guidance on, is the potential need for a boating capacity study at Possum Kingdom, something that we don't currently have. Aside from the property evaluation process, this data point, or what a boating capacity study would provide to us, is also important for our current day-to-day operations. Our folks at the lake can get permit requests for marina expansions or new commercial facilities today, and they do not have the information that we believe would be helpful for them to make the decision. So I throw that out there. This is not posted for action. This is just something for you all to discuss. And part of what we're looking at here, and I'll end with this is what boat storage looks like now. This is what we're seeing at lakes all throughout the state, all throughout the country. And so what obligation do we have as the reservoir operator to make sure that the reservoir we operate is safe for those that are going to use it, especially given the fact that our decisions on property in this particular case, because of what we own, can impact the potential for future development. So I'll stop talking, throw that out there.
Okay, Director Bourne has a question, and I have some thoughts.
You mentioned your matrix, which I like what you're doing. And do you in your matrix, is there a possibility to enter do you have a lake that you are trying to model after? Like, if you said Horseshoe Bay, I get a better picture of where you're headed. Or if you say you like Travis, I get an idea where you're going. But if you say Buchanan or some of these other ones, I get a different kind of picture. So I guess I'm trying to understand long-term, short-term. What's our model here? What we're trying? If you're trying to control stuff like this is a matter of there's lots of tools in your government bag of having land control. I would say around the lake more than we're exercising. It's there's a lot of tools you could use. But I'm curious, would it be wise to have a model lake that we'd like to say, hey, this is somewhere like we'd like to be like?
I think that's something a boating capacity study could look at. I know that while I couldn't give you an answer for a model lake that we're trying to look like, I know that we know of some we don't want to look like. I mean, probably the biggest example usually given is Lake Louisville, and not trying to, berate those folks that manage that, but it's known as one of the most overcrowded, unsafe reservoirs in Texas, and we don't want to look like that. I know that.
I think my thoughts as a resident of Possum Kingdom is I'm very supportive of the idea of a boat loading study. I think the results from the last study were very important. And my concern is from two standpoints. One of them is I know that we get lots of requests from commercial marina operators to build additional marinas in and around the lake. We've had many instances where I'll call them super marinas, that they wanted to build huge dock facilities that would have brought additional traffic onto the lake. I can't tell you how many times my phone rings with complaints about boat traffic even now on the lake. And as we see more development, I think it will only increase. There is the question of safety. There's the question of the wakes that are generated by boat traffic on the lake and the erosion that occurs on the shores. And I know that's a whole issue that we're going to have to deal with at some point. So I'm very supportive of the idea of a boat loading study, and I think it's one that we're going to have to do. I don't know the answer to those questions, but I think the experts at some point will have to tell us where the limits need to be. Yes, sir.
I would say we should be very careful, though, that we do the right kind of boat loading study if we do it. I have some personal experience with that. About 17 years ago, before I was ever on this board, and I live on the main body of Lake Granbury, and I wanted to build a dock. And the BRA had done a boat loading study on Lake Granbury, and they decided to put a moratorium on any more dock building. And I live in the upper part of the lake where there's not a lot of boat traffic like downtown, all that area down there and around Stumpy's and all that. And we don't have any boat loading problems up there. So I even made a trip down here to Waco for the public comments portion of the board, not knowing any of you, and spoke right from that pulpit up there and preached about how unfair that was because, my retirement home, and I built it on the lake to build a dock, and they said no. And I thought the boat loading study was flawed in that respect. So it would have to be done carefully and done right. I can understand not having these big commercial marinas and limiting that, and stuff, limiting canals and boat docks on there, but you just can't do a moratorium on boat docks, I don't think. It's not fair. Just my 2 cents.
It's good feedback.
Yes, sir, Director. Well,
First of all, I'd just comment that I think the picture is an interesting choice. None of those boats are on the water. So, I think it is, to Director Bourne's point, what is the intent? What is the intent? Because studies can be shaped to have an outcome that's desired. And so the understanding of what the goal is intended to be is critically important. And the variables that go into that need to come up with a common sense solution. Because there will be a variety of views of what right looks like. And so that means there ought to be what we used to call left and right limits to what that is. I mean, there's extremes on both sides, and so finding a balance between safety and recreation and all that is a part of what this should be about, without a assumed outcome going into it. So, but knowing and being able to monitor it before it becomes a problem is important. So I think those are all good points that are brought out here. And, you know, it's better to be ahead of it instead of trying to catch up later.
Director Lloyd?
Just without a study, from a management perspective, how often do we feel like PK is overcrowded? I mean, I don't know how do we define that, but is that a 4th of July thing? Is it a never thing? Is it an every weekend thing? Yeah.
That's where you stand. I hate to answer the question that way, but I would turn to Director Lattimore and ask you, as a resident of the lake, when do you feel the lake's overcrowded? And the answer probably is
July 4th.
a handful of weekends during the summer and maybe, you know, Christmas boat parades. And so, Director Lloyd, I don't know how to answer your question. My apologies.
Well, and I think Director Huber raises a great point. There are areas of the lake where you don't see anybody. And there are other areas, for instance, in the area where we live that's sheltered, it's like a racetrack because the wind, I mean, the prevailing winds are such that everybody wants to ski in that particular area. So, you know, back to what Rick was talking about, probably that boat loading study needs to look at certain areas that are declared to be no wake zones. And I mean, there's all kinds of boating safety that needs to be integrated into that study.
I'll just add one other thing from experience, and not with boats, but with cars. When you look at traffic congestion studies, it is centered around areas of conflict.
Yep.
And so to say a lake use study would be like saying, I'm going to do a car use study. And when you try to limit the use of cars, well, that's dead on arrival. But to look at areas of congestion and make sure that loading and congestion are all considered in a solution, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, if we were going to use it in evaluating a decision whether to allow a boat club like this pictured, you know, that'd be one thing, but limiting the public's right to access the lake is not something I don't think any of us are.
So here's what's stimulated this thought, and this is a marina like I see on LBJ. I've seen these on Cedar Creek, where you call ahead, the valet takes a forklift, and he goes and he picks your boat up on those rails, and he has it gassed and ready for you to go. So in the conflict of looking at all of these properties that we're going to look at now on the main stem of the reservoir, should we have one that we come to the board and say, this is one that we would recommend that we don't need for our operations? These are the kind of things that could be used on that property. So we could find ourselves down the road
Yes.
getting rid of properties and creating these type of scenarios. And what does that do on your 4th of July weekend? And I agree. I don't think there's any time during February, March, the cold months, maybe November, December, where boating traffic is an issue. But on holiday weekends and other times of the year, I think there's quite a bit of traffic.
David, it seemed like when I first came on the board in 2019, y'all just transitioned from, you had an airport, you had a police out there, you had a municipality almost, didn't you? Or wasn't it a municipality?
So over time, we became to look like a municipality, getting rid of, that's not the right word. Contracting out law enforcement to the county was probably the last part of what that municipal look of the BRA looks like.
So you really took a step away from trying to control it, but because of the growth and the pressure, it almost forces you to have another plan. That how do you control, how do you keep in the city, we call that zoning issues. You'd have this in special zoning.
Fair enough.
Or and then you gotta have a, planning and zoning board to oversee any kind of, requests that they have and exceptions and deal with that. I mean, there's always for every good thing, there's always a pushback on that stuff. So that's why I'm saying is, I love what everybody says. I've always liked it because it's independent, but at the same time, it's so independent. And Texas is growing so fast, and everybody looks at it, and the land reflects the quality because the prices are, I'm being told, $1 million an acre on up. So what do you do to protect an asset like this that has beauty? At the same time, our mission is water. It's not development as far as commercial development, these sort of things, or building a tax base for somebody else. But what do we do to protect the shoreline, protect the safety of the lake, to have a balance there? And that's why I went back with do we have a model we can look at in Texas, or maybe some other that we could say this is what we're shooting for, and contracting, we may contract this part out even more so. But we've already started the airport corrections there, which I know I've heard from people in Lubbock, they're very happy about that. A lot of them like it to be a lot longer for their jets, so that's why I'm coming back is what's our model? Is that possible?
I don't know. I know that LCRA is completing boat loading studies. They use Texas A&M, I believe.
They used AgriLife, yeah.
AgriLife through A&M to do boat loading studies. We haven't seen the scope yet, and to Director Weldon's comments about the scope and how you make sure that you're going into this with an unbiased approach of getting truly, the results that tell you how you want to manage your reservoir, or gives the board the data to determine how paternalistic you want to be over managing that asset that we own. That's to be determined. But I don't have a model for you. There's some things at Lake Travis that LCRA does that I love. There's some things that they do that I don't like.
Yes, sir, Director Huber.
If you divest of a piece of prime property on the lake, let's say, where one of these things could be built, can you put restrictions on that property when you sell it? That it can't be used for something like that?
I would assume that, and I'd have to turn to my attorney, but if we were going to divest a property, we could put any restrictions on such property that we wanted to before we auctioned it off.
There you go. Problem solved.
Yes.
Problem solved.
I have one
Yes,
last comment, because this is a very complicated, very comprehensive issue, and that if we stay focused on what the mission of the BRA is, and one of the factors is to protect our water resource, and if what Matt is suggesting, that possibly doing a boat study can help us as a board to understand the impact that the traffic currently has on the lake, that will help us evaluate other properties in the main stem of the Brazos up in PK around the lake, that we would have a better understanding. We can go down a rabbit hole about safety, and we can go down a rabbit hole but if we just stay to our mission is to protecting water, and if a boat study is going to help us understand how to do that better, then I think it's a great idea.
And I think, Madam Chair, Chairman Lattimore, I think what we would do from here, post this discussion, is go and gather some information from others that either are doing or have recently completed boating capacity studies. David mentioned LCRA. We've already talked to them a little bit about the one that they're doing. Get an idea of scope, what are the considerations, cost, timeline, and then bring that information back to you all at our next meeting.
Could you do that?
Propose. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Let's go in that direction.
Absolutely. We'll bring you cost, what a draft scope looks like, and those type things. For sure.
All right. Item 2 is a discussion and possible action on the proposed granting of an access easement over land in the over a tract of land in Somerville County owned by the Brazos River Authority and part of its B Mountain properties, presented by Mr. Riley Woods, Senior Staff Counsel. Riley? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm going to start out really quick and we'll get into the slideshow here. One thing I want to stress is this is a really unique situation. Goes all the way back to the 1950s. And it involves the B Mountain properties that y'all may recall about a year and a half ago. We took those properties and you all voted to retain them, or the board voted to retain them for conservation, reclamation, or conservation and natural habitat preservation purposes. And this is one of those properties. And at the time, we told you we were going to be coming back to you all at a future date in regards to one of those properties and an adjacent landowner who had a relationship with the property that we were working through. And so this is us coming back to you all now to talk about this situation and kind of the direction that BRA staff has attempted to put together what we consider a finely tailored approach to resolve the situation and at the same time maintain BRA's ability to utilize that land as we intended back with that resolution, and at the same time allow these folks the access that they kind of felt they had an expectation for. So I'll go through this, and let's see, how does that? There we go. So once again, if you'll recall, this is sort of just upstream of Lake Whitney, and it was part of the, I don't remember now, is it 6 Dam project that BRA was looking at doing back in the 40s and 50s, starting at PK and Granbury and a bunch of other lakes. So we bought up a bunch of property. You can see some of that property there in red. That what you're seeing in red is what we ended up retaining at the board meeting that we held in March of 2024. And so what happened, this is just sort of a quick refresher. The board or the BRA bought these properties in order to build that reservoir. Well, at the same time, Whitney was being built downstream of us, and the project just never came to fruition. We never ended up doing anything with it. And I think around 1963, the BRA passed a resolution that would allow folks that we had purchased these properties from to buy them back at the price we purchased it from them. And that program lasted for about, I don't know, getting close to 40 years. And then in 2002, with adoption of new policies by the BRA, that program ended, and we were no longer selling back, and there were about 19 properties that hadn't sold during that time period, and the property we're going to be talking about today is one of those that didn't sell. And let's see. So this is the piece of property we're talking about. It is a 99.5 acre tract. You can see it outlined there in blue. And it's just right immediately all along the shoreline. Just a really long, pretty thin track. So here's the history on this tract. This was owned by Dr. Little. And at the time we approached him to purchase the property, and in those negotiations, we told him that we would take it to our board for him to have the opportunity to have built into his deed the ability to purchase the property back at the price we purchased it from him, if the reservoir was never built, and we ended up not pursuing the project. And this is where this becomes a unique property, because it's the only one I'm aware of all these properties we purchased, of any of them I've seen in, throughout the BRA in general, with the exception of maybe something around PK, is the board passed a resolution and said that they agreed that they authorized us to put that provision into his deed, and so that if we didn't pursue the property, or pursue the project, that he'd be able to buy it back. Well, for reasons unknown, lost to history, it didn't happen. And I think he signed the deed over to us about 5 days after that board meeting where that resolution was passed. Don't know why. To this day, nobody does. We've searched the records. We've tried to figure out why it wasn't put in there. It wasn't. And so he didn't end up with that provision in the deed. And that's what makes his property unique, is that we did pass a resolution authorizing it, and nobody knows why it didn't end up in there. Well, he ended up not purchasing the property back during that period of time. Had that provision been put in the deed, he'd be able to buy it back today at the price he paid for it, which was like, I don't know, I want to say it was like $6,000 or something like that, back in 1953 that we bought it for. Since that time, the property has passed to his daughter and her family, and I want to say they first approached BRA in 2005 timeframe, they didn't know that the buyback program had ended, wanting to purchase it back. They were pointing to this resolution and so forth, and we always told them that, unfortunately, that program had ended, and since it wasn't in the deed, we could not, as a governmental entity, sell it back to them at the price that we originally paid for it. That we're bound by law to receive fair market value, and it had certainly increased significantly in value since that time. So they have approached us over the years occasionally. And let's see here. Let me get here. There is. Y'all may be aware of this. There is a statute in existence now that if you acquire land through condemnation and then you don't do the project, that the landowner has the opportunity to buy it back at the price that you bought it from them at. But that statute didn't go into effect until 2011. It's not retroactive. It doesn't apply to this property. This property wasn't acquired through condemnation, so it wouldn't apply to it from that perspective either. But just that statute comes up from time to time in relation to issues like this, and it's just not applicable. So as I was saying, since 2005, they've approached us occasionally. A couple years ago, they reapproached us with an attorney. I think they were looking into the possibility of litigation and maybe try to push that they had a right. We see where they're coming from on this, that they were promised something, it didn't end up happening. So staff has been attempting to work with them and negotiate with them and come up with a solution that is amicable to both of us, will avoid any kind of litigation like that, and both of us get our needs met. So the Walkers are who own the property now, and like I said, Sherry Walker was the daughter of Dr. Little, and it's kind of interesting, actually, all of their adjacent land that they own, that this property came out of, they have put into a conservancy. They are very big into conservancy and sort of the same interest that we have in preserving the land out there, and that's their interest in what they want to do. They have held a lot of they've had leases on and off on the land because BRA going, I think, back to the 60s or 50s allowed folks to release that land until we were going to actually build a reservoir. And they've always done a very good job maintaining it and have held river cleanups. They do a lot of environmental related work out there. And so we can't sell it back at the price we purchased it for, and I don't think they're interested in buying it at the fair market value because it would be very expensive. So sort of the solution that we jointly came up with was allowing them a very limited easement upon the property that would allow them to access the property, access the river, continue with their nonprofit work. I think they hold a number of like environmental classes, and like I said, they do river cleanups a couple times a year. They engage in maintaining dead property or dead, limbs and things like that on trees, invasive species and that kind of thing. So we have been negotiating with them and put together a proposed access easement that would allow them access to the property for those limited purposes, but would still allow BRA to fully be able to utilize that property for our purposes if we needed it for mitigation or if we needed it for any other environmental type reason that we would be looking at it. Allowing them to do that also keeps the BRA from having to maintain it. We would allow them to do that. Here's kind of a list of some of the things that they would be allowed to do on the property. Like I said, they would have limited property management, recreation. When I say recreation, it's really probably camping or allowing folks to cross the property, go fish at the lake or the river, I guess, kayaking, that kind of thing, erecting feeders and observation blinds. They've asked if the Corps of Engineers is okay, because the Corps of Engineers is who controls the shoreline in that area. It's still subject to some of Lake Whitney rules up in that area. And so in order for them to build a small boat ramp for launching like kayaks and such, they would have to get Corps approval. And if the Corps is okay with it, we said that BRA didn't mind. They wanted the ability to mow an acre near the shore that would be for the nonprofit work. Maintain one unpaved road for maintenance and emergency use. That's already out there. Same thing with maintaining a walking or equestrian trail. They already have a walking and equestrian trail out there. They would have the ability to remove invasive vegetation species, engage in eco restoration burns in consultation with Parks and Wildlife and TCEQ. There's, I think, maybe one barbed wire fence that goes across the property that's been there since the 1950s, and they're allowed to maintain that. Engage in fishing and game animal population management, and that also would be in conjunction with appropriate, like Parks and Wildlife and whoever, whatever management agencies deal with population. Where no hunting. It's for strictly management of population. Conducting nonprofit activities with the public, such as the river cleanups, environmental classes. They already have an existing water right. We would allow them to put a pipeline across to take that water from the river to the adjacent property. Some of the protections we have built in is, one, their use cannot conflict with our use of the property and our intent to utilize it for conservation and environmental mitigation. There's no engaging in commercial activity or for-profit activity out there, at least not without BRA written approval. If they came up with some idea and they wanted to run it by us. they would have to get our approval for that. We're not going to allow them to subdivide that easement and, possibly like try to subdivide the property above it and then subdivide this into a bunch of little parcels. That's not going to be allowed. It would automatically terminate the easement. There's no destruction of native vegetation, no hunting, as I said, no construction of permanent improvements. If they violate the easement terms, we have the right to terminate the easement. And they'll also have insurance. They're going to indemnify us for, anything that, bringing members of the public or whatever on property. And so that is what we're looking at, and I'll be happy to take any questions, answer any questions, discussion.
I think Director Bourne had a question and otherwise.
Yes, sir.
Who dropped the ball on the deed? Was it the party or BRA?
We have no idea.
Oh, surely.
We
bought-
really
who
don't.
bought
It
from
happened
who?
back in the 50s. Dr. Little's no longer around. None of the people who were involved in it are around. All we've got are board minutes.
No, I mean, no one can find out if you pass it and it's not even a title company or nothing there?
Nothing, no. I mean, granted, I don't even know I don't know how that was done back then, but we've got board minutes and there's a letter that came out of the board minutes that we sent them that said that we would be willing to put that in the deed. And how it didn't get in the deed, we don't know. And we're, from our perspective, maybe something happened that decided he didn't need that provision in the deed, or maybe it just we just don't know. It's entirely just blind speculation, but it didn't happen. But it was a resolution that was passed. It was authorized to be in there, and I don't know. Maybe somebody said, "Yeah, we'll amend the deed and get that, but we need the deed right now." Don't know.
Director Huber?
It doesn't seem like something he would just give up, that right? But if it's a past board resolution and a letter, is that not as good as it being in the deed?
No, it's not. I mean, if it's not in the deed, the deed is where a property right comes from, and that was never included in the deed. So
Accidentally, though.
from our perspective, there's not an actionable
Are they happy with
claim
Kind
on
of seems
their
like it
part.
would be the right thing to do to honor the board resolution and
but because of the way the law is right now, we couldn't sell it for less than fair market value, regardless of the resolution or not. And so that's why we've kind of come up with this compromise. They don't want to buy it for fair market value.
No.
And that's why we've come up with this compromise that would still allow them use of the property for uses that don't conflict with our use of it. And, hopefully, it's an attempt to be as fair to them as we can be under the circumstances.
Riley, they are in acceptance of the easement,
Yes, yes.
so they've agreed to that. It's up
They
to
have,
us.
yes, they have.
Okay. Other questions? Would you read the resolution?
I will. Okay, so be it hereby resolved that the Property Management Committee recommends to the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority adoption of the following proposed resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to grant an access easement to the Little L Land Conservancy, LLC, over a certain 99.5 plus or minus acre tract of land in Somervell County, Texas, originally acquired by the Brazos River Authority from J.G. Little in 1953, being a portion of that property otherwise known as the B Mountain Properties. Such easement to be in a form satisfactory to the BRA, containing terms consistent with those presented to the Board of Directors at its November 17th, 2025 Board of Directors meeting, and including such other provisions as determined necessary and acceptable to the Brazos River Authority to resolve issues relating to the property.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Motion made by Director Bourne and seconded by Director Lloyd. Would you poll the board?
Vice Chairman Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
There's no further items on the agenda. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor? Meeting's adjourned at 2:06.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.